What's going on? This is your man John Fortune, your host of the Frustrated Fan Sports Show, and tomorrow is a big game for the Washington Ragin Tide, and it's also the beginning of the second half of our season, and there are questions that need to be answered during this second half of the season, and these questions have to be answered so at the end of the season we can all understand what is basically going to be the future of this Washington franchise. You know, we have to really analyze a lot of things. So I have some questions that I feel needs to be answered, not only to us, but also to the team and the executives in the team to see what is the future of this team going forward. The first question I got is, what is our future at quarterback? Now, again, we've had Ron Rivera flip-flop on us. Again, his latest press conference, I think his last or his latest one, he talked about that Dwayne still had a future in Washington, which is kind of contradictory, but again, that's been Ron Rivera all season. We're talking about what could possibly happen with this franchise in the future at quarterback. Now, you're talking about you already benched Dwayne Haskins, who's on his rookie deal. And the fact that he's working in his second offense in the NFL and only his second year in the NFL. And you're going with a guy in Kyle Allen who's a free agent after the end of the year. And you're talking about a guy who's been in the system for 3 years, and that's the best you're getting out of him. I mean, the fact that Kyle Allen has been in the system for 3 whole years, and what we see is all that we're getting out of him in 3 years of an offense, that means that this guy can't be our future, because you have to analyze it from this standpoint. Can you imagine paying Kyle Allen, who, understand this, his agent is going to be negotiating him starter money. Can you imagine paying Kyle Allen $25 to $26 million a year to be the starter here, and that's the best you're going to get out of him as a quarterback? Especially when you have Dwayne Haskins still on a rookie deal, and a guy who can probably be a better quarterback in his second year in the offense versus being only in his first year of offense. We have to analyze that. Alex Smith is gone. He makes too much money and he can't be here next year. He cannot get injured in a Washington franchise uniform. He just can't. I mean, we all saw in that St. Louis game, I was shaking in my boots every time the man got on the field. But we have to understand that this guy is not our future. Kyle Allen may not be our future, and even if he is, again, paying him $25 to $26 million a year, that's not the right move. Especially for 3 years in this offense, and the best you're getting is that a lot of you are all saying, well, he looks serviceable. I mean, he looks good enough. He's kind of this. If that's all you're getting out of this guy, then why are you going to want to pay him $25 to $26 million a year? And understand this. This is not going to be $25, $26 million a year for just 2 years. We're talking about $25 to $26 million each year over the span of what may be 4 to 5 years. His agent will negotiate that. He's not going to be a backup here. He's more than likely going to be a starter here. So understand that that's not going to work out for us. So with that being said, that is a big, big question that needs to be answered as we go into the second half of the season, going into the end of the season. Number 2, is Scott Turner really a good offensive coordinator? Or is he a guy just relying on his dad's last name and being just a Turner? Because let's be honest, there's been a lot of questionable play calling that's been called by Scott. And the fact that everybody's talking about he's basically in his real first year of play calling, yeah, that's great. But at the same time, you've kind of destroyed some of the things about this team that doesn't really mesh well. One, Dwayne Haskins. You're talking about the fact that you got rid of Kevin O'Connell, who has some familiarity with Dwayne Haskins and actually was fixing an offense to work for him, which is why he looked so good at the end of last season. And you're now talking about you went with Scott Turner, who's young, who's learning, and things like that. You know, is he really our guy for offensive coordinator? Is he a guy that maybe this wasn't the right time for him to become an offensive coordinator? Because again, like I said, when you look at some of the things that were supposed to be happening, we haven't seen Antonio Gibson become anything like Christian McCaffrey. We haven't even seen the passing game coming out of the running game like it was supposed to. So you sit here and say, is Scott Turner really the right guy? You know, I mean, there's times where he's made very good play calls, but there's also been times where he's made disastrous play calls. And we're not really sure what we're getting out of this guy. So that is something we have to ask. Is Scott Turner going forward really our future at offensive coordinator? We have to answer that. Number 3, is Antonio Gibson our future at running back? Because again, I told y'all from my pre-draft show that I felt he was, now understand, he's exceeded my expectations because I had 0 for him. I had 0 expectations for this guy. I mean, I felt he was drafted in the wrong place. I felt that what we was going to be getting out of him wasn't what we needed as a 3rd round pick. Again, I said we should have took Devin Asiasi, who isn't playing in New England right now, but is somebody's being, you know, they're pushing for him to be a starter. But again, Antonio Gibson isn't what everybody thought he was going to be. There's a lot of you who said he was going to be the Swiss Army knife. He was going to be like Percy Harmon. He was going to be like Brian Mitchell. I told everybody, I told y'all, Brian Mitchell is my favorite Washington player of all time. He was never going to be Brian Mitchell. And I told y'all that. This guy is not panning out to what people thought he was going to be. And understand this. Look at it from this standpoint where everybody's focusing on the quarterback from Clemson. Should we actually be focusing on the running back from Clemson? I mean, when you think about what you're currently getting out of Antonio Gibson, and I'm over the he's still raw conversation. At some point, you gotta actually show us what you said he was going to be when you selected him in the 3rd round of the draft. You have to show us something. I mean, I think we might have seen one game where he was a central part of the run and pass game. But again, that's not what we saw in Carolina. That's not what we saw from Christian McCaffrey in Carolina. So if we're not seeing that currently with us in Washington, what guarantees that Antonio Gibson is truly the right guy at running back? We have to answer that question. He isn't Percy Harvin. He's not that. I mean, not at all. We haven't seen anything Percy Harvin like since this guy's got here. We haven't seen anything Brian Mitchell like since he's gotten here. So understand this. I mean, we have to talk about that. Is Antonio Gibson really the future running back in Washington? Number 4, Jonathan Allen. Is he only just a great locker room leader? Because his production on the field doesn't state that we should be doing anything with him. What is it about this change in the Jack Del Rio defense from the Greg Minuski defense that Jonathan Allen doesn't look as effective? That's something people are not talking about. People are not talking about how Jonathan Allen has, what was it? I think 12 sacks in 2 seasons under Greg Minuski, and currently now I think he has what, maybe 2.5, maybe 3. And you're, I mean, this is crazy when you think about it. And his first year he had 8. So what is it about the change in this defense that now Jonathan Allen isn't as effective as he was his 2 prior years? I mean, that has to be something that's on everybody's mind. Is Jonathan Allen just a good locker room guy, or is he just, or is he as effective as he can be? Is he being utilized correctly? You know, because again, I go back to what I said. You talking about in 2 years, because his first year he was off because he was injured, but in 2 years under the Greg Minuski defense, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Greg Minuski was a great defensive coordinator, but what I'm saying is that Jonathan Allen looked far more effective in Greg Minuski's defense than he currently is in Jack Del Rio's defense. Why is that? I don't know. I mean, currently right now, Jonathan Allen is giving me the Dana Stubblefield type of feel. You know, like he's a great locker room guy, great leader guy, but he's just not the most talented guy on the line. And I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person who feels that way. But we have to pay attention to what's really going on that is not getting the quality you need out of this guy. What's happening here that he's not becoming the special defensive guy he should have been when we drafted him and when he went so late in the first round? Did we make a mistake? I don't know. We have to look at the next one. Jack Del Rio as a defensive coordinator. Understand this, Jack Del Rio was out of the league for 3 whole years prior to getting a job here. Why was that? Has Jack Del Rio gotten to the point where the league has actually surpassed him in regards to understanding what type of defense he should be playing? Again, I've told plenty of people this. Greg Williams, for some strange reason, finds a way to get his players home all the time. But for some reason, we're not getting the same thing out of a I'll say extremely talented group on defense. Why is Jack Del Rio not getting the most out of this group? I mean, you're talking about we have a defensive line littered with first round picks. And even though I think we're second or third in the league in sacks, what is it that he's still not getting out of these guys that they only show up in games against bad offensive lines? I mean, like they should be a destructive force at this point. Like, what is it about like Pittsburgh and their defensive calling that they get the most out of the least amount of guys, but yet we can't get the most out of the most talented defensive line, which is probably the most talented defensive line in the entirety of the league? Like, when it comes to straight potential, the Washington franchise, the Ragin Tide, has the best talent for a defensive pressure. Yet still, we're still not getting there like we're supposed to. Why is that? What is it about Jack Del Rio's play calling that's not working out? Why is he not getting the most out of these guys? We have to question that. My next question, this linebacking core, which is basically an NFL experienced core, other than Cole Holcomb, who's I think only in his second year, you're talking about you have a team of linebackers that have all been in the league for a while and they're awful. Like, what is going on here that we can't see the true production out of this linebacking core that we should be seeing? We were supposed to be going to a 4-3, and now we're basically running a 4-2-5 pretty much the whole season because the linebackers aren't where they need to be. We have to analyze, do we have the right linebackers there? I mean, that is a question you have to really concern yourself with, because should we be drafting a linebacker in this upcoming draft? Because again, you're talking about the possibility of quarterback, but what about linebacker? I mean, we don't have, I mean, other than Cole Holcomb and I mean Kevin Pierre-Louis, he's okay, but he's not a guy you could build a future on. What do? You have to think about that. And like I said, in terms of experience, NFL experience, they're the most experienced core on the entirety of the team. You talking about that defensive line minus Ryan Kerrigan is like, what, 4 years and less? That should be something that people need to understand. Last but not least, my last question, is Ron Rivera even the right coach for this team? I mean, Ron Rivera this year has been very contradictory over things. I mean, from the whole Dwayne Haskins is our quarterback to Dwayne Haskins still need to learn more and we're putting him as the third string quarterback. To, well, we wanted to see, we asked Eric Reed to take a practice squad contract, but we really wanted to see what we were going to get out of these young safeties. I mean, come on, like Ron Rivera, you've been contradictory all season. Now, again, it could be a situation where he was focused on the Kansas situation, which I greatly understand. But you have to also look at it from an area of, hey, what are you truly doing? I mean, we had the issues with the calling timeouts on certain games. I mean, how much of the defense is he really overseeing? Did we give him too much control over the entirety of the franchise that he can't focus on his job? Because again, down in Carolina, he had a very good general manager down there. And did we give Ron Rivera too much power over the franchise that he can't focus on what he needs to focus on? And that's really focusing on coaching this team and being the best coach for this team. We have to pay attention to stuff like that. Again, hopefully it was just a situation where the cancer thing kind of was taking a front seat to him being a quality coach, and it's not a thing where he just has too much on his plate and he's not really able to focus on really coaching this team like it should be. I mean, you're talking about this guy only technically has one experience at head coaching when it comes to Carolina. You got to think about that. Even though he's been a coach, an assistant coach, and a linebackers coach, and all that type of stuff in the league, he's only had one experience as a head coach in the entirety of the NFL. That doesn't mean he can't do it, but did we give him too much power in only his second stint as a head coach? We have to think about these type of things. And I have to say this. All of us as fans, the reason I call Dan Snyder Fan Snyder is because he thinks exactly like fans. And what I mean is this. A lot of you think like him. A lot of y'all hate him, but a lot of y'all think exactly like him. See, a lot of you would have did exactly what he did with Dwayne Haskins in drafting him at 15 because he fell to 15. But a lot of you are doing exactly what he's doing when you talk about him. When you talk about the factor of tanking to get Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you have to think about it. We've destroyed young quarterbacks here for an entirety. How many of y'all remember that Patrick Ramsey was in his second offense in only his second or third year in the league? Because he went from Steve Spurrier's offense to Joe Gibbs' offense. How many of y'all remember that? How many of y'all remember that right behind Patrick Ramsey came Jason Campbell, who himself had experienced all those different offenses in his college career, then comes to the NFL, spends a year, I think a year or two in Joe Gibbs' offense, and then ends up in a second offense in Al Saunders' offense, then ended up in a third offense in Mike Shanahan's offense, in Jim Zorn's offense, and then had to learn another one. And then understand this, at that point, he had only been in the league for 6 years. 4 offenses in 6 years. That's crazy, people. That's absolutely crazy. Let's not even talk about Robert Griffin III. How about that? 2 years in one offense and was switching over to another offense in the third year. The only consistency we had at quarterback when it came to a consistent coach and a consistent quarterback was Kurt and Jake, and they couldn't even get along. We've destroyed young quarterbacks, and everybody's forgetting that Dwayne Haskins is only in his second year in the NFL, and he's already on his second offense. Consistency at the coordinator or coach spot and consistency at the quarterback is valuable. valuable. You got to think about it. When you think about all these quarterbacks around the league, Deshaun Watkins, what's the consistency there? He had Bill O'Brien for a very good amount of time. Yeah, Bill O'Brien was just fired, but he had him for a very long time. Aaron Rodgers was in Mike McCarthy's system for a very long time. Dak Prescott was in Jason Garrett's offense for a very long time. Drew Brees has been in Sean Payton's offense forever. Tom Brady was in Bill Belichick's and Josh McDaniels' offense for a very long time. We can go down the list of guys who've had consistency. Even Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has been with Pete Carroll for a very long time. You talking about Patrick Mahomes is only in what? I think his third or fourth year with Andy Reid. And even prior to that, Andy Reid has basically shown consistency when building quarterbacks. We have to understand, y'all, that either we're going to understand that all these questions that I proposed needs to be answered, and that we're actually going to be a team that in the future is going to be quality, or you're going to have to live the rest of your life understanding that you, as a fan, and fan Snyder are the same people. This has been your man, John Fortune, and this has been the Frustrated Fan Sports Show.